Hi, everyone. I'm just going to give another minute or so to let some more people come on in, and then we will get started for today. I hope everyone's doing well.
Hi, everyone. Let's see.
All right, and we are looking good. Welcome, everyone. My name is Carmen, and I am the training coordinator at the Temple Small Business Development Center. The Temple SBDC helps small businesses start and grow. We provide free one-on-one counseling and a variety of low to no cost webinars, and we are proud to be a part of the nationally accredited network of SBDCs with over 1,000 centers across the United States. You have joined us this afternoon for a website planning series, Website Technology You Should Know About. A copy of today's PowerPoint and a link to the recording of this webinar will be sent out to all attendees. And while all attendees have been muted, we encourage you to post any questions in the chat or Q&A. And now I will turn the floor over to Jane.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Clark. Well, you probably know why we're here. We're going to learn about technology that you should know about. So I'm the co-founder and creative director of BrandSwan. I've been developing websites since the 90s, and boy, has the technology changed since then. And I have over 12 first place awards, so pretty good at this. And I also kind of consider it a challenge because of how fast the technology is always changing. So keeping up with it and always knowing what's happening is sort of important to me. A little bit about the company I work for. We make beautiful brands, savvy websites, and marketing that matters. So today we're going to talk about the parts of a website, where to register your domain name, how to choose a web host, and we're also going to dive into SSL certificates and why they're important. I'm curious though, has anyone been to my previous seminar, Securing Your Website webinar? Anyone? Usually always have like a couple. This is a great segue. Just feel free to drop in the chat if you've been to my one last time. We're going to be doing a few more, so feel free to register for those. Cool. Thanks, guys. So let's talk about what makes up a website. This is the hard part. This is where it gets a little techie, but then hopefully I'm going to kind of move past this and show you more of a visual that will make more sense. So when you register your domain name, you can set what's called the name servers. And this is where the domain record lives. And this is the instructions. So your domain has a bunch of records on it that says, hey, the email associated with this domain is here. The hosting that has this domain is here, and they can be at completely different places. And this just lets the internet know, where your stuff lives. And all of this can be at completely different companies and locations. There is some conventional things that you can look for, and I'll explain that in a second. So you have your domain name, and that's made of two parts. You have your domain registrar and your records, and that's where you bought your domain. Consider where you bought your domain like the super admin. You can at any point change where the records are. And so when in doubt, go to the domain registrar. Attached to your domain name are called DNS records. And they're the list of instructions that point to where your email is, it's what you kind of use to set up your Google Analytics to prove you own the domain. So you use your records in a variety of ways, primarily to point to where your website host is and where your email lives. Now, so that's your domain name. And of course, you rent your domain name for life. You never quite own it, but a little bit of a bummer, but it makes sense. So moving on to the web hosting. Now, your domain and hosting might be at the same company, but it's also plausible that they aren't. They can be at different companies, and I'll provide some guidance as to what that might look like. So your web hosting can have three things attached to it. First is the web server. Now, this is where your website lives. You might have domain control in your hosting. So what that means is you set up the domain instructions where your web host is, and that gives your website, it allows you to do different things because you're kind of claiming it as an owner there. So it allows the web server to take control of it. So if your name servers aren't where your domain registrar is, where you bought the domain, it's usually where your website's hosted. but that doesn't mean it has to be there. So this is kind of an optional thing that can happen sometimes. Then you have your email. Now, old school web hosting used to include email. And I'm not sure the age range, but I'm going to talk about some pretty ancient technology here where you might have 100 free email accounts, but they only are like 1 megabyte, file size, right? So nowadays that would never work because people are sending huge attachments. And so that's sort of an antiquated system. So I recommend if your email is where your website host is, it's probably not awesome. You might be missing some emails because they will reject emails that have a huge file size. So if you're having any issues with your email and it's a big part of your business, that you might want to think about going to a independent provider over here, which could include Office 365 or the G Suite. So that's a little bit of an info dump there. Here's an analogy I like to use. I like to go to the library. So think of your website like a library. I'm not sure if you're younger than me, you might not know what a card catalog is, but it's basically a box. Think of it like a file cabinet, and you open up a drawer, it's alphabetical, and you're trying to find a book title. So if your domain name is like the card catalog, that shows you where your website lives in the library. So the book on the shelf is your website, and the shelf is the hosting account. And in most cases, with the shelf, you're sharing your hosting account with several other websites. If you want a whole shelf to yourself, you're going to pay way more than that, but you will get dedicated resources. And that's usually just for high traffic websites and websites that are processing a lot of data. So you usually don't need your own account or server. You can share it with others. So if you already have a website and you're not quite sure how to access it, we have tools for that. So first of all, if you don't know where your domain has been registered, you can use something called Whois. I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to go ahead and just type in my domain name. I can type today. And it gives me a lot of information. So the first thing it says is where my name servers are. Now, most name servers has some indication as to where it is. Sometimes there are a bunch of weird, domain control 12, but typically they're always linked to a certain registrar, if you will. So in this case, it's telling me that my records live in Google, which is true. I use Google domains for most of my domain registrations, and I'll go over that in a bit. It also says a couple of other things. Now, with Google, you get free privacy. So unless you have privacy, your information is going to be loaded here. They can see your address, your phone number, your email address. So if you don't have a private one, they will see that. What's the downside is that people can, contact you, and usually there's kind of scammers. So for example, a registrar will come here and see that your domain is up soon. So it's going to send you a letter in the mail that says, hey, renew your domain. But what it doesn't tell you is that you're actually moving your registrar and paying them way more money to do so. So just keep an eye out for that if you don't have a private registration. I believe it used to be a little bit extra at GoDaddy, but I believe that they're trying to compete with Google now. And so, I'm not saying, Okay, so is my screen being shown? Can I get confirmation here from someone else? Okay, cool. Yep, that's what we're talking about. All right, cool. I forgot what I was going to say, but scammers, letters, moving, Google. Let's go back. So there's some other ways you can check your website. So for example, there's a site checker. Now, this is going to tell you where your website is hosted. So if I type in my domain name, I don't know if it's going to work because I have private registration. Let's see what it says. Okay, so it is checking my records. And it's going to tell us who the web hosting provider is, the name servers, which is the DNS records, the web server, and even the IP address of my server. I'm going to reload because it seems like it's struggling here a little bit. refresh. I think there might be a server problem across the Eastern Seaboard, actually, because a lot of websites were down this morning. We shall see. Okay, here we go. So web hosting provider is Google, and that's because I have private registration. However, my IP address is legit, so it is pulling my IP address. But oftentimes, if you don't have the privacy, it'll say your website is hosted at SiteGround or GoDaddy or wherever. And then you know who to contact, right? Especially if you're in a company and you're trying to hand off website stuff and no one knows the password or anything. Who here has had that experience? I've had lots of clients who've had that experience and they don't know where to start. And I would start by checking, exactly where your website is. And I have one more cool tip for you that you guys are gonna like. It's called Built With. Now, Built With will tell you exactly how your website was built. So let's say you have no idea, like, is it a custom site? Is it WordPress? What is it? So if I were to analyze my site, it says I have Google Analytics installed. I have a Facebook signal installed. Gosh, skipping over LinkedIn, I got have a MailChimp newsletter link on there. I have all these plugins. I have Yoast WordPress plugins. So now you know that this is a WordPress site, right? You keep going and adjust Facebook logins, social plugins, the SiteGround optimizers in my caching system. It even breaks it down by different categories. So it's saying, hey, here's what this website uses for e-commerce capabilities. And it goes to WooCommerce. We will be talking about an e-commerce series coming up. So if you're interested in that, you can register. It'll be right here. And that the framework I use is Divi. Mobile, it just breaks it down. So now you know exactly what's powering your website. It's also good if you really like a website and you want to know how they did it. This is a good way to do so. So as you can see, our website is quite robust. And making sure that you're only using certain plugins that are needed is a whole different conversation. But yeah, so that's how you can find out where your website is registered, where it's hosted, and what's powering it. I just love that part. Okay. Let's talk about domains. You have a lot of website extensions. And honestly, I would say early 2000s, or time is so strange now. Let's say maybe 2010, they started releasing these extensions and they weren't really popular. Really what professionals thought of it is that if you couldn't get a .com, you had to pick something else, but it caused a lot of problems. For example, let's say your company was named, I'm gonna use my company name, BrandSwan, but you couldn't get brandswan.com, so I went with brandswan.gov. No, I can't use that. That's a government-only website. Let's say I use brandswan.org. The problem is that most people are going to type in brandswan.com. So if they're in the same industry as you, now you have a lot of brand confusion. However, we also live in a period where you have people who buy up all these domain names, like really great names, and then they sell them for a lot of money. Especially if you want, I remember, gosh, there was a couple. I'll give you my experience. When we first created BrandSwan, no one had the name BrandSwan, but someone had randomly bought brandswan.com and they wanted to sell it for $1,500. And we're like, do we really want that? So what we ended up doing was doing brandswan.design because the brandswan.com wasn't a conflict in any way. We ended up, once we got like a year under our belt or so, we ended up negotiating brandswan.com for only $1,200 since we bought that. And we just wanted that brand protection because we knew our company is going to go more than just regional, So think about where your domain name is going to be used, if it's going to be confusing, if you have any competitors in your industry that have the same name. And I will say, though, that your primary domain, so long as you have the .com covered, can be really fun. For example, gosh, if your company name was called Bikes and Rocks for some reason, you could just say bikes and .rocks. So you can get really creative with that branding. And you don't have to get a .com, especially if you have that coolness under your belt. So it's not as important to have a .com, but if you plan on doing nationwide business, I would really try to get it. Another example is to get creative with the name. So I had a company, a Bavarian Bakery. Now, BavarianBakery.com was already taken because that's sort of a generic name for a bakery. But instead, we went with YourFavoriteBakery.com. So now we're making it fun. It's a .com, and yeah. So just some advice for you on how you can manage your website extensions and use them to your benefit. Okay, so here's what I recommend. Buy your domain separately from your hosting. We always want to kind of put everything under one umbrella because it seems easy. But I will say that not all hosting accounts are with it. And by with it, I just mean they're not using the latest versions of secure scripts, they're not giving you enough resources to power what the cool website can now do, because the technology has just exploded and we can do so much fun stuff with different themes. But I've noticed a lot of grandfather companies like GoDaddy, I try to stay away from because they just want to charge you more money for less resources. So I'm going to give you my top 5 list of hosting companies that you should use. But think of your domain name as just, you know what, you're just registering it. It doesn't have to do a whole lot. But your hosting, that's what powers everything. And you want that to be fast, you want it to be easy, you want it to be secure, and you don't want it to be old and slow. So don't let where you buy your domain influence where you get your hosting. Okay, guys, I want to know, where is your domain registered if you have one? Where are your domains registered? Pair, I don't think I've heard of that one. Learn something new every day. Google, GoDaddy, domain.com, Wix, WordPress. Now, Wix is a little bit of a problem because let's say you don't want to use Wix anymore. Now you have to move your domain to a new registrar. Oh, okay, yeah. If you buy it through Google and then hook it up with Wix, that's fine. GoDaddy for domains is just fine. Google has, like, you know what, I'm going to talk about that in another slide, so you hang tight. But yeah, Namecheap, all these are good. Again, doesn't really matter too much. I would just make sure that if you're the kind of person who wants to talk to someone on the phone, don't pick a website registrar where you can't contact support by phone. Because what you might find is that you are submitting a ticket and then it takes 24 hours or 48 hours to get back to you. And then you're kind of stuck there. So make sure that you're picking a provider that works best with you and how you want to communicate. With Wix, so for example, Wix is usually a starter site where you kind of get going, and then when you expand, you kind of want more, so you move someplace else. When you purchase your domain through Wix, they're using, I want to say, a third-party domain registrar. So now you have to transfer your domain from Wix to a different registrar because Wix doesn't want your domain if it's not in hosting. And they might have changed those rules. A lot of hosts will say, hey, if you're not actually hosting with us, you can't put your name servers here. Let's see. So that's what I meant about Wix. So what I like to do is just register it to your domain registrar of choice and then hook it up with Wix. That way, you're not held hostage where your website's hosted. Next question, is it overly careful to use Whois to see if domain names are taken? I don't recommend Whois to do that. I would recommend, and sometimes, honestly, I know I talk crap on GoDaddy, but I usually go to GoDaddy.com and start searching. Now, the one thing about GoDaddy.com that Google doesn't have is that GoDaddy has access to more extensions. So, for example, I think maybe .ninja Google doesn't sell. And I think that's because their domain names are much less expensive, whereas, because the people who make the extensions set the price. So for example, I think brandswan.design, I think that .design is either $30 or $60 a year versus $12.99 for a .com. So, so if I wanted to see Brand Swan, this is the third time I spelled my company name wrong. That's fine. Okay. So it's saying that that's available, but it's not because it's mine. So they would probably contact me and say, hey, it's available, but it's not. But here's what they do. They give you all these cool examples that you can purchase instead. So you can do brandswan.marketing, which would work because we are a marketing company. .me, .biz. Don't get .biz, guys. It's like the .com reject. If you have to get a .something, do .net. It's also awful. Yeah, so I always feel like if someone's a .net or .biz, they just couldn't get a .com. So I would just try to get more creative. Even, brandswan.co is better. That sounds more kitschy, more like quaint, and it feels more intentional than a .biz or .net, but they just have like bad reps, I guess, for that reason. Cool. So here's some really great ones. Google domains, again, free privacy. Domain.com, GoDaddy.com, I believe, is starting to initiate the free privacy to compete with Google. So check for that. Now, Google Domains doesn't have any coupons, but GoDaddy typically does. So you can get like a good deal the first year, but you can't use those coupons for renewal. So just make sure that you know what the renewal price is. So you might buy it for $1.99, but then next year will be $12. Okay, so these are the ones I like. So you can move your domain name to a different company. So let's say you're at Wix and you have to transfer your domain. This is what you would have to do. So let's say you're like, okay, I don't want my website at Wix anymore, but my domain name is there. What you could do is transfer your domain name to a different registrar. It takes 5 to 10 business days. You have to insert some authorization codes. It's a little bit of pain in the butt, but it's a bit easier than it used to be. So you just have to wait a while and then let it come to your new registrar. And then it takes on that name servers of your registrar. So then you have to reset up your DNS records if you have like email and whatnot. Sometimes you can import a zone file, but that gets a little complicated. So you might want to talk to a web designer if you want to make it so nothing is down when you switch. Else is going to be a little bit of your website might be down, your email might not work until you reset up those instructions. Okay, let's take more questions. I know I've been taking them throughout, but you guys are on a roll. What else you got? I might have answered them all so far. Give it one more minute. Yeah, we're going to talk about email and money. Justine, what about money and taking payments? That's a bit, that's a big question. Okay. I'm going to keep going because I think this is going to answer a lot of your questions moving forward. All right, so we talked about domains and the whole scope of that, but let's actually talk about the website hosting. And I'm curious if your guys, where is your website hosted? Is it different than your registrar? Let me know in the comments. Where is your website hosted? DreamHost. Network Solutions. Wix. A lot of Wix and Network Solutions. Okay. Squarespace is another solid one. Shopify, great for e-commerce. Okay. All right, now I have an idea and I can talk specifically about these. GoDaddy. You have a website builder, but they also have hosting accounts. All right, so here's my top 5 hosting companies. SiteGround is my favorite by far. You get a free SSL, which I'll go into. Flywheel, Media Temple, InMotion, and DreamHost are all really good options. There are more that aren't on this list. I just haven't tested them myself. These are my top hosting companies. If your hosting company isn't on here, that's okay. Most of these companies here, they're not they want you to install your own software on them. So whereas Wix and Squarespace are helpful because you can start building right away, I will start talking about that though. Okay, so let's start understanding the terminology of what a hosting account provides you. So most of the time when I'm building a website for a client, they only have one website and we typically go with a startup. So you get 10 gigabytes of web space. That's a lot, but you can fill it fast if you're not careful. It gives you 10,000 visits a month, which is usually way more than you possibly need for a small business. Unmetered traffic, free SSL. All of this is just a bandwidth of people visiting your website and how often they visit it. It does a daily backup. CDN is content delivery network. Basically, it syncs up with your site to provide the content faster. I typically don't use this for people who like to update their content often because there is a delay and sometimes you don't see it right away. Free email, but again, don't use the email in these things, trust me guys. Security, e-commerce enabled, that means that you can process payments through it. You can manage your WordPress. It has a plugin that helps with all this caching stuff, unlimited databases. That means you can have a bunch, even though you can have a bunch of WordPress databases, but only one install. Yes, renewable energy match, that's fun. So they just power their websites through renewable energy, which is cool. And then as you get more and more needy, they give you some more stuff, but typically the setup is plenty. And just to kind of set your expectation on what that costs, for the first year, it's $4 a month paid annually, and then it goes up to $15 a month paid annually, which is honestly well worth it. So usually paying like $144 a year or so, if I did my math right. All right. Oh, one more thing I want to show you. So for SiteGround, they show you a comparison of different plans, and they go through a lot more than this. So for those of you who need more technical explanations, you can take a look, and there are tooltips that explain to you what it is. Yeah. Okay. So this kind of goes well with your question, Eric. If your website is sluggish, it could be your hosting account, or you might need to optimize your website. Not Eric. There's someone who said, oh, okay, cool. Salma, I hope I said that right. How to compress images and resize. It's going to depend on what platform you're using. If you're using like Wix and Squarespace, they probably tell you if you're uploading a large image and resize it for you. WordPress did install something in the last couple of years that maxes your images at like 2,500 pixels at the highest dimension. You can also, through optimizer plugin, so for example, if you're hosted at SiteGround, SiteGround has a optimizer that's a caching system and also will go through your current site and resize images as well as provide versions of those that are faster for mobile. So it kind of optimizes your site and then speeds it up based on that. You could also lazy load your images, which means that the images don't load until they're in the viewport, that they're on the screen. That's when they load. For slow connections, it's a little awkward, but with fast connections, depending on who your target audience is, yeah, you can choose if that's acceptable or not. So yes, I would say there's also something called Smusher, and I will put that in chat for you because I don't think I referenced that here. Smush. All right, here we go. I'm going to go ahead and link this. It's free, and it allows you to compress existing images as well as set rules for when someone uploads it, which is great if you have someone on your team who doesn't have Photoshop and knows how to resize. This will help them with that. I'm already all over the place, guys. Where am I? Let's find out. Okay. All right, cool. So that is hosting. We are doing questions. Okay, Regina, you will receive a recording and the presentation. Okay. Small biz, Billy, hello. How would you compare SiteGround with DreamHost? I don't know actually, because I haven't used DreamHost in a while. But what I would do is just look at the comparisons side by side. And really it's going to come down to how much you want to spend a month and how much memory you get. If you go into your cPanel in either one, you're going to see the resources and when you hit them. So if you're seeing that you need more memory and you're hitting that max a lot, then you might want to consider a different host that allows you new resources. I will say, for example, I don't recommend Bluehost as of at least 2 or 3 years ago, because they didn't have an option to give website more resources. They just wanted you to stop using plugins that resource hogged. And I didn't think that was a good solution, because, you know, we're building digital environments and the websites need to do more and more, you know, for that experience. So I didn't agree with that policy. It's possible they've changed that, and I could be wrong about that. But I've heard nothing but good things about DreamHost. So if it's meeting your memory requirements and it's running speedy, then you're good to go. Hope that answers your question. How to separate yourself with someone with a similar domain name and concept. That's a tough one. First, I would go back to the name. And I would see who was in business first. And I might get creative with the name, but, you know, obviously hindsight's 2020. But I would start with the name and I would see, how can I make this different? And then I would change your domain name to maybe your slogan or something. So that way they don't accidentally go to your competitors. It's a tough one. People go to your website a couple different ways. One, they type in your name into Google or a service you provide, and they find your site that way instead they're clicking on the domain and visiting. Or they might have your business card and they type it directly in and go there. So the only time you're going to have an issue is if someone's like, oh, let me contact that company, and they just assume it's your name.com and they go where they go. So you're going to lose that business if your name is the same as someone else's, unfortunately. Okay, great question, guys. How much should I pay a web designer to start my website? This is a tough one. It depends on what you're using and what you want your website to do. Also the quality of the website. So if you want someone just to put text on a page and kind of build out like a very simple theme using Squarespace, you know, you might pay like $500 up. But if you're looking for like lead capturing and to do things, for example, you can book an appointment with me online through my website, and that syncs with my calendar and make sure there's no conflict, and that's great. When someone contacts me with a contact form, it goes into my CRM, and they're added as a lead and workflows start and we can keep it going. So this depends on how much you want your website to do for you, because it can do a lot and be really cool. Typically a website starts with us around 6 to 12,000 is usually the average of what people pay us to build something like that. And we also have a $3,000 one. And I would say, gosh, I have some friends who don't do websites under 10,000 because of the complexity of it. But if you want something for a couple $100, you might be to find a student who just wants some extra money for books and can whip it together. But there's not going to be that thought behind it of how can I make this website make me money. You, Rodney, you can get your domain name from GoDaddy and choose any other hosting company you want. If your website is on the GoDaddy builder, you're stuck. You have to redo your site. But if you're on WordPress, you can take that WordPress and move it anywhere you want because it's open source. There you go. Okay, moving on. Hosting alternative website builders. Now here we're going to get a little bit more into the Squarespace, the Wix, the Shopify, Pixpa. And you can see a side-by-side comparison here. I have a link. And it kind of go through like, hey, it's easy to use, template choices, what language it supports, navigation depth, and that just means like how many drop-down menus you can have. The widgets that are available for it, if it works well with mobile, if it has an e-commerce capability. So I would definitely visit this comparison tool to see, what meets your needs the best. I will say that Shopify is definitely the best for e-commerce. And Pixpa, I don't have a whole lot of experience with, but I've been eyeing it up for other clients. And it allows you to upload your photos, have watermarks on them automatically. You can sell your stuff online. You can have your galleries for people to prove. So sometimes there really are builders made for certain industries that aren't on this list. So you can definitely look outside this. And if they have, just do some research. If they have pretty high reviews, go for it. But these are really great for starter websites. And you can easily do it yourself. Okay, so going back to that, I recommend that these are only for startups because with these companies, they have their own proprietary software and you can't move your site. You would have to rebuild it. So just keep that in mind when you're hosting. If you're happy with all the capabilities you get, stay there. But if it doesn't quite meet your needs and you want to be more robust, maybe save up for that really cool website and just use this as a starter. Any questions on that? I think I've answered a lot of them, but any questions specifically on website builders? Again, really great for someone who just wants to do a website in a week or less. You can probably do it in a night, depending how big your website is, because they have that builder for you, but you can't move it. You have to redo it in a different program. All right, awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the SSL, security for online communications. Back in the day, and this might be like 10 years, back in the day, an SSL was really only used for secure sites like e-commerce and government sites and websites and banks and things like that. Then, out of nowhere, Google decided that for anyone who did not have an SSL installed, it was going to have a big red insecure button next to the address bar. And a lot of people who weren't technology savvy was like, well, wait, this website, is it hacked? Is it malware? Like, should I not go here? Is it dangerous? And so it really forced everyone, no matter what they sold or didn't sell on their website, to have an SSL. So now this is pretty much default for any website hosting account. In addition, it does impact your SEO. So if you don't have a secure connection, someone who does with the same content is going to come up higher than you will. So what is an SSL? Well, it stands for a secure socket layer, and that's why we call it SSL. And it establishes a secure connection. Now, this isn't going to stop your website from getting hacked. And I'll explain that in a second. So here's what it looks like when you have a secure website. You see a little padlock. Sometimes it's green, depends on the browser, but otherwise, if it isn't, it might have like a yellow exclamation point or a broken lock with a red icon. So that's what people are seeing if you do or don't have one. So although having an SSL can help, it does not prevent hackers and malware from infecting your website. That's a different type of security. So what an SSL does is that it's like a tunnel, like a secure tunnel. You have your website and then you have your destination in the server. While I'm going to say car, while the car's in the tunnel, they are invulnerable to certain, security issues. But once they arrive there could be a security issue, and before they leave, there could be a security issue. So it definitely helps transport information back and forth securely, but it doesn't do anything more than that. So think of it for sending information securely. So doctors, for example, they need an SSL if they're taking social security numbers and whatnot on their website. Now, one thing I didn't mention, but it looks like we have some time, so I'm going to. Who here knows what PCI compliance is? PCI compliance. It is a fancy term that basically means that you are following the protocol set forth by the credit card companies. And if you are storing credit card information and other personal data that could be used to, hurt someone, you have to be more secure than you would be otherwise. And there are a long list of steps that you have to do. So most people, what they do is when they take payments through their website, they use a third-party provider that handles all that PCI compliance. For example, PayPal, Stripe, Shopify, they all kind of handle that for you. But if you're building your own site, you just want to make sure that you're just transporting the information to them, but you're not storing the information, because again, who here wants to be in a situation where their server gets hacked and now all their information, client's information is out there, and now they have to put out a press release? It can get messy. So when in doubt, don't just transport the information and don't store it on your server, and that will help you with the PCI compliant piece of taking payments. Any questions so far? Okay. Donna says, I pay for the SSL and it shows up on my URL, but at times when I check on a free Google site, it says no SSL. Okay, this is interesting. Try adding the www before your domain name and then remove the www and see if that makes a difference. Because the www might not be secure. And there's a couple things you can do to fix that. One is to change the name servers to your hosting account, and then your hosting can create what's called a wildcard SSL, and it can use any subdomain on your website and make it secure. Whereas for an SSL, you kind of have to, use the exact domain. So make sure you're typing what's actually the SSL is supporting. See if that helps. Regina, is that already on website builder like Wix and Shopify, PCI compliance? Yes. Yes. Now, again, if you take that information and import it into a CRM and that gets hacked, that's, different. But there's also liability insurance for cyber attacks, I believe. So if you're a super important internet business and have lots of data, maybe think about getting that in case there is a breach of some sort. Okay. Small Biz Philly, you're testing my knowledge today. I appreciate it. Are traditional websites written in HTML more secure than a CMS site such as WordPress? Yes. Yes and no. Yes and no. Oh God. I'm like, should I share a personal story? I'm not sure yet, but maybe I will. So an HTML site, it depends. It really comes down to scripts and vulnerabilities. So if you code an HTML site with just CSS and there is no JavaScript or anything, and there's no plugins or add-ons, then it's definitely less at risk than WordPress. So think of like every plugin and thing your website does as another door into your website. Yeah, I mean, an HTML site, regardless of how you code it, is still HTML. So yeah. Also think about if you have a contact form on your website, that has to be written in a language, right? Either Perl or JavaScript, PHP usually. So now that is, a way. You can do server security, which will help regardless of what platform you use. So, and there's definitely some for WordPress sites, which is why I love WordPress so much. It just does so much cool stuff. You can install a server. If you contact your hosting company, usually they have like a security package where they have like scanners and stuff you could have as an extra security. If you're on WordPress, definitely install the following plugins. You definitely want Loginizer, which will prevent people from being able to guess your password a bunch of times because it will lock them out after 5 tries. And WP URL Hider. What I like about this is that it will change the login URL. So what happens is now the bots can't just brute force try to keep spamming the password because it's going to a page where that's not the login. So it kind of stops them in their tracks. And there is something even better called word fence, and that's a really resource heavy. So if you're doing a lot of secure stuff, you might want to have that on there, but it is a resource hog. So for a lighter impact, I like the WP URL hide and the loginizer. But I would say security can be server-wide and not just code-based. You know, I think even, if I remember correctly, there's even browser security issues too, not just code. So there could be in a situation where, you know, maybe the browser had a vulnerability in it and it was able to exploit the HTML with the browser to install malware or something. So although it is safer because you don't have as many open doors, but every time your website does something and adds that script on top of it, it's just a door to get in. But don't let that stop you from doing cool things. You know, don't make decisions out of fear with this, but make sure that you're just set up for success with security. Okay. Any other questions? No, you let me ramble for a while, guys. Yes, I will. This is Loginizer. Let me go ahead. 1 second. Boop. And another little tip is you can install whatever plugin you want, but make sure that has a lot of high ratings. Like don't install anything under 4.5 stars because there's really no need to. This it? I don't think it's it. Because there's so many plugins, some of them have like the dumbest names. Hide URL. You see. Hide URL. Da, 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 da. Is this it? There's a lot of them that do this. Maybe it's this one. I might just log into my website and pull it. Let me try one more thing. I think this is it. All right, I found it. And that allows you to change your login URL so people can try to guess your password. Also, if you have certain plugins installed, they will try to exploit those. So that's why if you have a WordPress site, you want to make sure that everything is up to date. So that way everything is working and secure. Now, if you're using Squarespace or whatever, they've already taken care of that for you. So that's one of the cool upsides of that. All right, let's talk about web apps. Custom or CMS? Are there plugin available on other sites? No. Each proprietary software like Wix or Squarespace, they have their own add-ons. Some of them might not have any add-ons. Some might allow it. Like I believe Shopify allows some add-ons. So you would just have to see what they have available. Yeah. So yes, these are some options on, and this kind of goes back to what Philly said. So you can custom code your website. You can use a CMS like WordPress, Joomla, Magento, WordPress.com. Don't confuse WordPress.org with WordPress.com. WordPress.org is like the developer open source software. WordPress.com is sort of their dumbed down version that's similar to Squarespace. So they handle the server and they give you some restricted access to kind of make it, I think, more user-friendly. Either way, all of these sort of require a bit of computing savviness, whether it's using a mouse, dragging and dropping things, adding to your navigation. So all website builders are CMSs, and CMS stands for Content Management System. Basically, any builder that you can design your site with that doesn't require you to code it by hand. That's the CMS. So I kind of talked about this, but yeah, WordPress.org is not the same as WordPress.com. So if you want free access to all the plugins that moderators have made, you want to make sure that you're on your own server. But if you don't want to deal with that, go to .com and you'll pay for your theme, pay for some other stuff too. It's been a while since I've logged into that. They might have cooler features now. All right, so what can a website do? And this is where it gets exciting, I think. So you can have on your WordPress site, for example, event calendars, galleries, video players, booking systems, lead capturing forms, search features, appointment schedulers, online quizzes and polls, which is great for lead capturing, security and backups, blogs, social media feeds, and just tracking the effectiveness of a Facebook campaign. So your website can do a lot for you. And that would be my hope for you guys, is that you don't just have a website that's confirmation that you exist, but it does something for you. It's almost like having a personal assistant. That's the best feeling in the world. I will say though, that all websites today are expected to be mobile friendly and have an SSL installed. So if someone tries to make you pay more to have a mobile friendly website, I would look elsewhere, because that tells me that that's not a part of their regular process. All right, any more questions on that? On CMSs?
As we have a final moment here and we're wrapping up, I dropped a link in the chat to a survey. It takes less than a minute and it is required by our funders at the SBA so that we can continue to offer these cool workshops. So if you guys could just take a moment and fill that out, we would really appreciate it over here at the SBDC.
Cool. I'm not quite done yet. I still got time, right?
Yes, so you got
Okay, cool.
30 minutes.
Awesome. So let's take a quick peek into email. Please don't use the email that comes with your hosting account. Get your own provider. And honestly, just get one of the two, Google or Microsoft. Because when you pay $6, $12 a month, whatever it is, you get all the software that comes with it, like the Excel, the PowerPoint, and Google has its own version of those that work just as well and can kind of go back and forth. So don't just get your web host email. It might seem easy, but it's just going to be limited. It's going to be limited. So top email companies: Google Workspace, formerly G Suite, Office 365. I think these prices are still right. They might have gone up. Bear with me. And if you absolutely can't use a custom domain name with your email, go to Gmail. It's free, a little bit less professional not to have your own custom domain name, but it's just so user-friendly and wonderful. So those are my top 3. So I recommend that you use your own custom domain name to add a little bit more professionalism. So instead of Jane345 at Gmail, use Gina Branswan. Much nicer. So if you have the opportunity to do it, definitely do it. So here's my setup. This is what runs my company. So I use Google Workspace for my Word, my PowerPoint, my slides, all of that, and of course Gmail. So even though I have jane@brandswan.design, I still log into Gmail to read it. So that's really cool. I host my website on SiteGround. It has a free SSL there, and I use WordPress.org as my web app that lives on my web server. So this is my recommended setup: Google, SiteGround, and WordPress. There are other CMSs out there. For example, I mentioned Magento and Joomla. There's not as many developers for them. I personally don't have any experience with them, so it might be harder to have a new designer take over if you do that to go that direction. Just keep that in mind. All right. So if you guys want to talk about anything, please feel free to schedule a call with me. And you can also join our Facebook group, Reveal Your Inner Awesome, where we talk about some mastermind stuff. So if you're feeling like you want to get inspired, come on over. And I also provided some references for you guys in the presentation, so you can click on them and use them for whatever you want. Thank you guys so much. You were awesome, and I can't believe we made it all the way to 1 o'clock.
I know, this is awesome.
We made it.
We do have a final question in the chat if you want to peep in there really quick.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. If I have an Office 365 student, I can change it to my custom domain name. No, probably not. That would be like a work account you would need. Unfortunately, nice try though. Yeah, because your student account is probably tied to a bigger account, like your university has all these licenses available, and then you're using that license, so you can't change your email to a custom domain name. You have to start your own account. Thank you everyone for coming. You were awesome, and hopefully I'll see you at the next webinar.
Thank you so much, Jane. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.